good morning or afternoon, 365, and anybody else that might be watching. I'm Sergeant Ayala. Today I'm putting together this video to show you guys how to set up the TOC box along with our SINCGARS radio as well as a COM201 antenna. And I'm going to show you how to do that in case of a hasty situation where you might just be setting up a TOC and you need to get the communications up as soon as possible, or if all you have is a vehicle with a radio inside of it and you need to communicate on the go. I'm going to show you how to set up a COM201 in a vehicle as well. For that you will not need the TOC box, but the COM201 comes in very handy when all you have is a vehicle with a radio inside of it. Starting with setting up the TOC box inside of a TOC situation, first thing you want to do is grab a couple extra hands, as this thing does weigh a lot. Almost impossible for anybody, except for maybe the strongest guys in our unit, to pick this up by themselves. It weighs over 140 pounds. And secondly, you want to make sure that you have a large enough and sturdy enough table to support it. Then once you do have it up on your table where it will be staying, then you're going to want to take off the lids on either side. Now ours is marked front and back, but once we get the lids off, we'll be able to easily identify which end is the front and the back. So let's start with that. So we're just going to take all the clips off and then take both of the covers off, and then I will turn it around to show you what's going on at each end. And there are clips on the bottoms of these lids as well, so make sure that you're able to slide the TOC box around so that you can remove all of the clips. Now that we have both of the covers removed, I'm going to go ahead and spin this to the back side to show you what's going on back here, and then the steps that will need to be taken in order to initially set this up. Everything that you need to set up the TOC box should be housed inside of it. That's not including the antennas, either an OE254 or a COM201 as I was speaking about earlier, but everything else as far as the power wires, speakers, and if it is in a secure location, you could actually keep your radio locked in here as well. But once we take everything out, I'll show you everything itemized. So we have 2 speakers here. So one for each radio that's can possibly go in here. We can put up to 2 radios inside of our TOC box. Then we have all the cords that connect our transformer here. This is what converts the power from DC to AC. So this is already and should already be hooked up inside of your TOC box as well. This will be hooked up to the radio mount itself. Lastly, we have the power cord here, which is unique to our power converter for our TOC box. On each end here, you'll see that this connector, if you look closely inside here, has keyed areas inside of this connector. The other end goes to a wall outlet, but we're going to connect this end first, and this gets connected right here on the AC in. And you'll notice that there's 5 pins inside of here, as well as if you look on the edge of the connector here, that there's areas where the keyed portion of our connector line up. So we're going to put it in, make sure all our pins are lined up and the keyed areas are lined up, and then we're going to twist the collar in place to lock it. So it is a very good idea. Obviously we're going to need power for this, so when you're setting this up, make sure that you are close enough to a wall outlet, or that you do have access to an extension cord so that you can get power to the TOC box itself. And like I said earlier, this does convert the power from AC to DC, since this does initially work off of, like in a vehicle situation, the radios work off of DC power. So what this does is take the wall outlet AC current and changes it to DC current. So if during setup, when we have this all hooked up and plugged in, if for whatever reason we're not getting power, or we're not able to power our mount, which is in the front, I'll show you that a little later. If for whatever reason that's not working, you do want to check back here first, make sure your connector is connected properly, that you have the plug plugged in properly, but also right here you want to make sure that these switches are switched to the on position. And once we plug this in, you'll notice that you'll be getting power here, because you'll get an indication and you'll get the actual amount of voltage or current, depending on what you select here, will show up here, showing that you have enough power to operate the TOC box. So as you can see, with our connector plugged in to our power converter and the wall, we now have power running to the TOC box, and our display is lit up, showing us the current voltage at this point. So don't need to go too heavily into that. Once it's lit up, you know you're good. Now that we know we have power, I'm going to go ahead and spin it around to show you the rest of the connections and the rest of the steps to get our TOC box operational. And the top of the TOC box is a good spot for the speakers. You can go ahead and put them up there and leave them up there for the duration of its use. However, you should have cables long enough to go ahead and locate the speakers wherever you'd like them to go. At the front of the TOC box, we have our radio mount with amplifier, and we also have another amplifier. So this setup that we have, yours may vary, but the setup we have here is a dual amplifier, so that we can have both of our radios in power amplifier mode. Like I said, yours might be different, but you should have at least one amp, this one right here, connected to your mount in your TOC box. On the mount right here, we have our power switch. This will turn the mount on and off, and you'll notice right here is our indicator light. Now, if for some reason when you turn the switch to on and this light isn't lit up, it could be that this is actually just turned to the off position for light discipline functionality. So if you don't initially see that light, just twist this first before you go ahead and troubleshoot anything else. I had this happen to me before, where I was like, had everything hooked up correctly, turned on the power, couldn't get this light to light up for any reason, and even in all my years experience, I forgot that all you have to do is twist this and your power or your light indicator here will come on. Right above our power switch and light indicator, we have the J1 and J2 ports. The J1 port is where your antenna gets directly plugged into, and the J2 port will connect a Whiskey 2 here to our radio, so that we can, that makes this possible to communicate in power amplifier mode. On the other side of the mount, we have our data ports, audio ports. None of this we really have to worry about or focus on for the purposes of this video, but directly across from that is our other power amplifier. Now, if you do want both radios to be able to function in power amplifier mode, you're just going to set this up, the J1 and J2 ports, the same exact way that we set up these J1 and J2 ports, but you'll set this one up on the other radio. And if you look down and across, so if you follow the J1, J2 ports down and across, here is our power switch and light indicator for this power amp. I'm just going to keep this off for this video, but like I said, if you do need to hook both radios up in power amplifier mode, you're just going to follow the same exact steps that I'm going to show you here to connect our radio and hook it up in power amp mode. So next, let's grab our SINCGARS radio and put it in place, and I'll walk you through that as well as the function knob and all the buttons that we're going to be using to load a single channel frequency into our SINCGARS radio. So here's our SINCGARS ASIP radio, and to locate this properly inside of the mount, we're going to be lining up this port here with this connector back here, and it can be a little tricky. Just want to make sure that a couple of things are out of the way. One being this mount here, this locking mount, as well as our rubber cap. So if that is on, you want to make sure you remove that and just make sure it's out of the way. You can kind of stuff it behind here. There's a little crack in the mount there where you can just jam it into place to make sure that stays out the way. Once you get this positioned properly and lined up, line the ports up with the connector, you're just going to want to lift the back end of the radio up just ever so slightly, because it's not completely flush when you just line it up like this. So like I said, when you line up the port and the connector, you'll notice it won't just slide right into place. But if you just use your index finger and lift up on the back of your SINCGARS just ever so slightly, you'll then be able to push it into place. Once it's in place, make sure that you just snug it down using this fastener right here. So you might have to unscrew it just a little bit in order to get the locking mechanism to spin around and spin into place. Then just spin it back clockwise until it's snug. No need to over tighten it. 2 fingers tight. Once your radio is in place, go ahead and turn the power to the mount on. As I showed you earlier, your little indicator light should come on. Once you have that power indicated, we can now move to our function knob here on the radio, and I'll walk you through the steps on programming a single channel into our SINCGARS. When you first get your SINCGARS radio from your commo section, it's typical that the radio will be in the off position, meaning that this radio is off and zeroed, so there should be nothing stored into here. So when we do finally have it all mounted and connected like we do thus far, the first thing we want to do once we have the power on is go ahead and put this to 0, or the Z here. When you put it in Z, it's going to put the radio into a self-test mode, and it'll let us know if the radio is good or not. Oh, and one thing I did forget to mention is when it's in the off position, you do have to lift it in order to twist it counterclockwise, and vice versa. When you're putting it into off mode, make sure you lift it and twist it the rest of the way into the off mode. Once you have the indication of good, we're going to go from the 0 or Z position on our function knob, and we're going to turn that all the way over to the LD position right above the function. So that's the spot we want to be, right there in load, and the radio will not accept a frequency unless it is in the LD position. Before we load our single channel frequency, I'm going to briefly walk you through the menu/clear button, as this holds most of our features that we're going to utilize on our SINCGARS radio. So if we press this once, it brings us to the volume, and this controls the loudness of the transmission that we're receiving. Does not affect how loud we transmit. The volume can be selected anywhere from 1 to 9, 1 being the quietest, 9 being the loudest. I like to keep it at 9 just so that I'm not missing anybody's transmissions. Now, you can keep it there and it'll be fine, unless you're in some kind of noise discipline situation, then you would want to have it at a lower volume. When we hit the menu button twice, we come we come to our channel feature, and this allows us to put six different frequencies into our radio. For now, I am going to be loading our frequency into channel 1, but if you do have another frequency that you need to load in here, just hit buttons 1 through 6 to select which channel you want to load that frequency into. Hit the menu button again, we come to our power mode, and for this, if we need to change it, we just hit the button directly above our menu clear button, and it is CHG for change, and it goes from low all the way up to power amp. If we hit it again, we go back to low. This would be for a whip antenna. This would be for a not fully erect OE254, fully erect OE254 for high, and power amp is the only mode where we can actually transmit in power amplifier mode, and the only way we get the full function of power amp mode is with our power amplifier. So if you don't have a power amplifier, that will not work. After power mode, we hit menu again and we come to our mode selection. This is single channel, frequency hop master, frequency hop 2 master, back to single channel. We're keeping ours in single channel as we are only loading a single channel frequency, and we don't have a fill for ComSec to even operate in frequency hop mode. So keep it in single channel. Once you hit menu again, after mode comes ComSec, falls along the same lines pretty much as our mode function here. ComSec, PT, CT, this is all for encryption, right? And we don't have encryption. You can encrypt a single channel. Again, we do not have that fill. We're going to leave ours on PT for plain text. So just to go through those one more time, we got volume at 9. Our channel, I'm going to be loading into channel 1, so I'm going to hit the 1 button to change that. Power is basically which antenna we're using, and we're going to be using a COM201 and a power amplifier, so we're going to be on PA. Mode is SC for single channel, ComSec is PT for plain text, and we're back to volume. Now that our menu functions are all set up properly, we can go ahead and load our single channel frequency. To do that, you want to hit the freq button here. Should pop up all zeros as our radio is zeroed and there is no frequency loaded. Once you see all the zeros, you can go ahead and hit the clear button, and then you should just get dashes, 5 dashes. Once you see the dashes, you can go ahead and put in your frequency. I'm going to be using 7200. Go ahead and load whatever frequency you're using into place. Once you have your frequency there, hit the stow button. You'll notice that the numbers all blinked. That indicates that the frequency is now stored in the radio. And again, to check this, you can hit menu to come back to your menu, or you can just wait and let this go back to its home screen, which is the frequency. But if you are in any other menu option, you can simply hit freq and it'll show you that your freq is loaded. If you fail to or forget to switch your function knob to the squelch on position, even with a frequency loaded into your radio, you will not be able to transmit, or you're going to have problems receiving or transmitting. So this is a crucial step. If you are having problems, if you need to troubleshoot because you're not being able to hear or transmit, good first spot to check would be right here. So we got our TOC box set up and plugged in. We have our radio also installed into our mount of our TOC box. We went through all of the menu features and functions, and we installed, or programmed rather, a single channel frequency into our radio. But there is a couple more steps we have to do before we're able to actually transmit radio communications. And those two things that we have to do yet are install a hand mic, which can be a little tricky. I'm gonna walk you through that step by step. And then we're gonna hook up our COM201, which is going to be used in a hasty type situation when first coming onto or into the AO, so that we can set up communications quickly. And also if we are in a situation where we only have a vehicle with a radio in it, we'll also be able to use our COM201 for that situation as well. So back to the front of our radio here, we have these two ports here. One is labeled audio fill. This is where a ComSec would go. And we also have one labeled audio data. This is where I like to tell people to put their hand mic, as it is audio/data. We want to leave the fill port open just in case we do have to load this with ComSec. Not our case in this situation. Just mentioning it because it is common for those for that question to come up. So I always tell people just to put it on the bottom port. Also, don't confuse your radio ports with the ports on the mounts. We can leave these alone. We're focusing on this port right here at the bottom right of our radio. Now, anybody who has had to set up a SINCGARS before knows that the hand mic can be a pain in the butt. I'll give you a couple of tips. Firstly, let me preface this by saying, please don't use saliva or any other bodily fluids to connect your mic to the radio. Instead, you're just going to get up a little up close and personal with your radio and your hand mic, and you're just going to blow hot air on both ends to make it easier to connect this into place. Then what you want to do is line up the flat spot on your mic connector. That gets lined up on at the 12 o'clock position with the radio audio port. Then you just have to push in very firmly and twist just about it's probably like a 1/16 of a twist clockwise. And that's on. So you can see that the flat spot is only angled up like that much. So it is just a very small amount of twist. And once you think you have it in place, just go ahead and give it a little tug. Make sure it is securely fastened. Now we can move on to the antenna setup, and we're going to focus on the mount and radio portion of things. And I'll show you briefly how to set up a COM201 as well. And then we will provide another instructional video on how to actually set up and erect an OE254. Here's our Whiskey 2 cable. Now you should keep one stored inside of your TOC box just to make life easier, so you don't have to search around for one. I like to keep everything I need for this setup inside of the box, locked in place, minus the radio. Usually this is going to be locked in the cage, and you'll have to get that from your S6. Everything else that I have talked about so far can be stored in the TOC box itself, as long as that itself is locked in a cage. Just want to make sure that everything is properly secured in its correct places. Back to the Whiskey 2. You'll notice it's a short cable with two 90-degree connectors on it, and it is labeled Whiskey 2. Now, if you can't find one of those, in a pinch, you can use a longer version. Now, this is not a Whiskey 2, but this too can be used in order to hook up your power amp to your radio. If you are using one of these, if you have to use one of these, I like to connect the 90-degree end to the RT mount, I should say, the mount itself, and then the other end into the RT or radio. With the Whiskey 2, no need to worry about which end goes where. They are both exactly the same. However, just like our power adapter cord that we connected to the back of our TOC box, this too is keyed. As you'll notice, it has notches in the metal collar that line up with the pins inside of the connector on the radio. Once those are lined up and you push the Whiskey 2 into place, twist the outside metal collar to lock it in place, and you'll notice you can give it a snug and it doesn't go anywhere. Same for this end. Now you have two ports here on the power amp, J1 and J2. J1 is labeled A and T for antenna. That means this Whiskey 2 is not the antenna, so it goes on the J2 port labeled MVRT. So it's telling you exactly what needs to go where. This port connects the power amp to the RT. So Whiskey 2 goes into J2. And again, the other end goes right here on the radio. As for our antenna cable, which is going to be plugged in here, most of the times you'll need an adapter to fit this. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is what your antenna cable will look like, and right here is the adapter that I was speaking about. Now this can be removed. So if it is not attached to your antenna cable, the adapter that is, you could potentially store this as well inside of your talk box because you will need it. Otherwise, just keep these in a very safe location, or just keep them connected to your functional antenna cables that you're going to be using, such as we have here. So you can either, I think it's easier actually, if you screw this adapter onto the antenna cable first. Then once you pull out the length you need, you can go ahead and connect this to the radio. Typically, we set up the antenna first, connect the cable to the antenna, run our antenna cable where it needs to go, i.e. to the radio, wherever our talk box is located, and then connect it. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just simply showing you how this gets connected. So you have your cable, your adapter, and again, this is keyed exactly like the Whiskey 2. So once you have it in location, push it into place and twist the metal collar to lock it in position. Give it a little snug and you know it's secure. If you're having trouble either removing the cable or installing it, twist the cable, the whole cable, along with the collar. And that just makes it easier. Instead of trying to fight the whole adapter itself, you're using the leverage from the cable in order to line everything up and secure it properly. So same thing with coming off. If you're having problems getting this off, same thing, just kind of twist the whole cable so that you can get it in the appropriate position in order to get it free. So assuming that your antenna is already set up, albeit your OE254 fully erect with the antenna cable connected, or you have a COM201 which you have set up for a hasty position, which I will show you how to do here momentarily. Assuming that's already done, that completes all the steps necessary to set up, install a talk box with a SINCGARS radio. And once you have your frequency loaded into the radio, it is crucial that you switch. You son of a... Shut up! Once you have your frequency...